Hi out there, this is Evangelist Garmon. I'm coming to you today in this video because of an event that inspired me this weekend. It was an empowerment weekend. One day was for women, the next day was for men. And one of the things that I noticed that the speakers did was they shared their life experiences. Now, a lot of us know that when we go through things or things that we've gone through in our life, it may have seemed like it was just an involvement for us. But in our lives, every situation we go through, every circumstance is for a testimony. That means it's meant to be shared with other people. And that is what led me to do this today. A lot of you know, or some of you know, that I am a writer and a minister. And one of the things that I've never really done before is kind of like explain or kind of give you a little synopsis of me and what led me to walk in the path that I'm going in right now. If I had to look at my life on a timeline, and we had to begin with the beginning of my life, I can tell you that the beginning of my life was definitely marked with death. And what I mean by that is the day that I was born was not an unusual birth. It was very unusual for a lot of reasons. Number one, my parents were in a terrible accident. My mother was like 7 months pregnant with me. And because of this accident, my mother got entangled in the car and she went into labor with me at that time. And I was born. But there was also another event that transpired. My grandmother was with them in this accident. So my birth marked the end of my grandmother's life. So it was like 4 hours after I was born, my grandmother passed away. So, and if you really knew my grandmother or saw a picture of her, I look exactly like her. And people always tell me her spirit went into me when she passed away. And I count that as an honor because when I saw a picture of her for the first time, I was like completely blown away because I look exactly like my grandmother. But then by the time I was 8 years old, I had my first experience at that time with sexual molestation. And it was from relatives. It wasn't something that at that age you could really comprehend. All you know is you've been violated in some strange way that shouldn't have happened. It went on for about maybe 4 or 5 years. By the time I was 12 years old was when I finally had the courage to tell my dad, look, this is what's happening. I'm being, violated in this way, and I need you to come get me. And of course he did. Well, you would think that moving from my the area where I was when I grew up, that would have gone away. But I still experienced a lot of sexual attacks in a sense in the area where I moved to with my dad. I also, by the 9th grade, had experienced a traumatic rape situation, which kind of changed my perspective on men. It really started building this antitrust and my trust that I could never really foundationally get back. But over the years, you fight through it, you try to get through it, and you just depend on certain things to be in place. Well, as a result of that event, and some other things that happened, I basically tried to commit suicide around that time. I got involved with an older guy that eventually let me pregnant, which from what I can kind of recollect, that's what I was told. But I got past that, and my dad decided to send me back to the abusive situation where I was for whatever reason. And as I continued growing through that tough time being a teenager, it was very tough for me to adjust to understanding people because of the lessons that I had growing up. By the time I was 18, I basically moved away from the family I knew. And I didn't turn back. Went back on occasions, but when my dad passed away in '98, I basically cut that particular part of my family off because dealing with the abusive situations as a child and trying to get past it. A lot of people didn't understand why I secluded myself so much from people was because of that mistrust. And I would say that over the years, it took me a long time, but I did get to a place of forgiving and letting people go. But I wanted my life after that point. By the time I graduated from high school and went in the military for a little short while, probably about 2 months that I stayed in the military, couldn't do the exercise, which was fine by me. But I wanted my life to mean something. You know, I wanted to make a difference. Initially, my dreams in life was to become a filmmaker because one of the safe havens that I found growing up was writing. Writing was my way of escaping everything, and even as a child, I became very fond of it because going through the different situations, I got the opportunity to create a new world for myself. So as I grew up and graduated from high school, I wanted to go to NYU, where I wanted to major in filming and become one of the first major black female filmmakers. And that was my thing. But unfortunately, I couldn't afford to attend NYU or get to New York. So I became a English teacher. And I figured, you know, getting into English, that's still my attachment to writing, right? So I grabbed onto that and I lived with it for a long time. And it still is a big part of my life. Well, you would think that by the time I reached in my college years that I would be more settled in life, but I had a lot of demons to face. I had a lot of things that I never dealt with. I never dealt with the traumatic situations from my past. And at this time, I kind of felt like I was on my own. It was just me against the world. That's basically where I found myself. And I decided to get involved in a relationship with this man. And I eventually married him. And I eventually had two of the most beautiful girls in the world. And it still wasn't enough for me. You know, I was in this marriage, but I came to realize that the marriage didn't represent what it should have represented. It was basically some way for me to feel wanted or feel with someone, never reason to get married. You want to make sure you get married for someone that you're in love with and not as a compensation. And that's what it was for me. I mean, I was blessed beyond measure to have my girls, but at the same time, I was struggling with my emotions and ability to adjust to being in this marital situation. And I know I probably didn't give him the best marital situation that I could, but he wasn't understanding of my circumstances. So that kind of led to some things happening on his end, which eventually led to our divorce. And I walked away, and to decide that I was going to raise my girls. And trust me, it wasn't easy at all. You know, you go through these situations as a single parent, and you're just thinking you're going to try to do everything you possibly can for them because they didn't deserve to be in the midst of your chaotic situation. So you devote your time to your children, and that's exactly what I did. I devoted to teaching and things of that nature. And I actually, you know, moved around a little bit over my lifetime to basically, and let's be honest, I ran away from things a lot. I always running to me away from circumstances instead of dealing with them was easier. And that's exactly what I did. So I ended up moving to North Carolina for a little while. That was a situation that didn't work out, and yes, it was because of a man. And it turned out, from what I could see at that particular point, was this guy just up one day just decided he didn't want to be with me. And there I was, stranded in a new city with my girls, but I did have a good job, which I'm thankful for that. And I was able to have my own, and I did. So I just decided that, hey, maybe it's time for me to change my life a little bit and not let this become a defeat. So I didn't do that. I didn't let that defeat me. So I ended up being set up on a blind date with this guy that actually turned out to probably be the worst mistake I probably could have made. And I didn't make this mistake like I did the first on love. I made it because I wanted to be. And when I wanted to be in this situation, unfortunately, right after we had decided to marry, it became very abusive. I got physically attacked by him on various occasions. One time nearly choked to death. The second time he literally picked me up and body slammed me to the floor. and I left. I happened to go to work that next day, bruised up, banged up, stiff as a board. My body was just in pure anxiety from the impact of hitting the floor. And I felt, at that time that my life was really over by then. But all I could think about was protecting my children. Yes, I got them into that situation. Yes, I got myself into it. Yes, I stayed into it. The situation, I guess, with this guy was he had some pent up things on his own issues, dealing with them, trying to get through them. But we were both two broken people, unable to help each other because we couldn't face the demons of our past. And when you're in those kind of situations, you do have a hard time accepting or helping each other. Two broken people who are not trying to get help from anyone else do have the tendency to cause a more diabolical situation. Unfortunately for me, it did not work out the way I would have wanted it to work out. I lived in abusive shelters, several of them right after that incident, which brought me from North Carolina back to Florida. And when I moved to Florida, so after all of that, I kind of felt like I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed because I put myself in a situation with a man that nearly killed me and nearly took my children. And I felt really guilty about it. I felt guilty that my kids were exposed to that. I feel guilty that that all that happened, and I even felt really bad that no one in life will ever love me. I kind of felt that all these bad things were happening because I felt like I was unlovable and that no one would really love me the way I deserved to be loved. And at times I kind of felt like it was my fault. I became too, I tried to take care of people instead of expecting to get it back in return. I always tend to pour myself out to people. And I guess at that time it was for the sake of them not leaving me. I felt like if I didn't do this or do that, that someone will walk away from me. So I got to give my all to keep them in my life. But after that last attack with this guy, and I saw literally my life just flash before my eyes that night, I really felt like it was really time for me to start investing and looking inside of me to see what needs to be fixed. And so I started on the journey after I left there and I moved back to Florida. And I've just been trying to change my life ever since. As some of you probably know, I just recently got married again, and it's been one of those things where I don't feel like I have to prove myself anymore. I don't feel like I should have to gain someone's love by doing things to make them stay. I really feel that I can be grounded in myself, and I really would love for my life to just be totally at peace. And that is the thing that I always pray for, and I still pray for. Because you have outside forces that try to come in and destroy something that otherwise is supposed to be good. Now, I'm going to be honest. I've always felt that Satan felt that my life is supposed to be in chaos all the time. But I always had that energy to kind of like fight through it and let him know, hey, I don't care what you try to throw at me. I'm going to be happy. My happiness is not dictated by your control of people around me, of circumstances, or how you let things go. God doesn't allow these things to happen to destroy us. He allows them to see how far we're going to trust in Him. And there comes a time in your life where you have got to let go of all of those things that may have been in your past. And I don't care how many people try to tell you, when you know that you've worked on getting rid of those things from your past, don't let nobody bring those things back up to you and make it seem like it's an excuse every time you act out or you try to stand up for yourself. That's what a lot of people seem to do. And I went through that. I went through this time with people where, every time you get angry about something, they reflect it back on your past, like your past is what's holding you. I made the decision after that domestic violence situation that I was going to get myself some help. I got counseling. I went to people to kind of really help me, and I allowed myself to heal. One of the toughest things when I did go and get help that just broke everything was when I was in this office and the counselor was asking me about my abusive situation as a child. how do I feel about myself? And how did I feel about the child that was going through that? And I said I got angry because of the fact that I didn't fight hard enough. And I felt like it was my fault. As you know, abuse is never anyone's fault except for the person that perpetrates it. And it's also an attack that the enemy uses to destroy those that he knows God has a special place for. And that would include you. I don't care whether it's child abuse, sexual abuse, rape, domestic violence, whatever it is. Those situations happen in that past to give you a testimony. What you do with those things after they happen, and when you grow and you start working through them, you get to an understanding that this was just not meant for me. Maybe this will touch somebody. Maybe this testimony will help somebody. Maybe somebody will come out of this on the other side instead of deciding that they're going to end their lives because they can't get rid of the memory. Memories are there as an attack of the enemy to keep you bound. What you have to do as a person, you have to pray honestly to God to ask him to remove those things. Ask him to get those things out of you and learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. But keep in mind, even though you're standing on your own 2 feet, God is right there with you. And when you get the opportunity to share your story, as I'm doing right now, hoping that it will touch someone, hoping that it will lead someone to want to do better for themselves, then that's what this is for. Don't feel bad. Let the Lord guide you. Ask him to remove all those things from you because he can. And trust me, it's not going to be easy every day, but it will get better and better and better. As I look over my life from the time I was born until now, I see the hand of God in my life. When I was 15, that's when I really came to embrace the Lord. Though I knew God was there with me. The night that I was almost killed in a domestic violence situation, I felt the protection of angels around me. To me, it felt like that night, they felt like this was not going to be the end of my story. This was not going to be the end of my life. And God sent intervention in there to keep me. Because the moment my body was heading to the floor, my head was going first. And what happened was, I just felt like my head was gently placed on the floor. And the rest of my body hit the ground. And I knew angelic protection was there. So there was a reason I survived that. There was a reason I survived the rape and the molestation and all of those things. There's a reason. And every day of my life, the enemy keeps trying to fight to keep me from getting out from up under all of that stuff. But the point is, I've made it through it. I'm willing to use it as a testimony. I'm willing to share my story. Because at the end of the day, Satan does not have as much room as we allow him. And I refuse to keep giving in. I refuse to keep sitting back. Hopefully, this will help someone. So when I minister and I go out, or when I write messages, or when I write books, I write it with a purpose in mind. It's not always about the money. It's really about the impacting of souls. That someone can see another person who's been where they've been and are able to kind of like reach out to them. And even right now today, because I'm taking a stand, the enemy is fighting at my marriage. But I will not give up my marriage. I will not give in to the things that he's putting in my path. I am happy to say that this is my life, and I take that back. This is God's life, first of all. He's loaned it to me. And since he's loaned it to me in good faith, then I need to produce something in good faith. I want the Lord to be so proud of the fact that I did not let life get me down. I want him to have that same feeling for me that he had for Job. And he will have the same thing for you. Let life be what it is. It is a setup for a testimony. You have the power and the potential to come out of anything. You have the ability to embrace the impossible. And you have the potential to release God's people from their torment or their pain or their suffering. You just have to speak out. So I'm thankful for the event that I went to this weekend, that empowerment event. And it did help me so much to want to do this today. I usually don't like being in front of the camera, but when you got to tell your story, you got to tell your story. No matter how much you hate to do it, don't be afraid. Step up, step out. Let God use you and watch the impossible happen. From Minister Latanya Garmon, Heart for the Masses. Thank you.